Hey guys, and welcome back. So we'll finish up now with the last video for Unit 2, and we have two more concepts to talk about. The first one here is the clearance concept. Now, the idea of renal clearance refers to the amount or the volume of blood plasma that's completely cleared of a certain substance within a specific time frame. Now, that's a little bit confusing, but what scientists use and what doctors use this idea for is to determine the overall functioning of the kidney. One thing that's quite important with this clearance concept is how long it would take the kidney to filter out different things in your blood. And one example of this is drugs, for example. If you were to take a pill, say an acetaminophen, so something for pain or fever or inflammation, one of the things that scientists are interested in is how long does it take for that blood, that drug to enter your system and be cleared, first through the liver, of course, and then as it diffuses through the blood, and then how long does it take to get cleared from the kidneys. So by knowing how long it takes the kidneys and our system of filtration, the kidneys and the liver together, how long it takes those to break down that drug and clear it, we know when it's safe to take another dose, for example, or if it was a drug that we needed to take at regular intervals, we could take it, is it safe to take it every 4 hours, 6 hours? Do we need to wait to 8 hours? So this idea of clearance is something that's quite important. And we use drugs as an example for that, but it's quite important to know that for pretty much everything that we consume. So that's the idea of renal clearance. How much of the volume of blood plasma that can be completely cleared of a certain substance within a specified time frame. So that's the idea of renal clearance. And let's move on now to the last topic of this unit, and that is micturition. Now, micturition is another word for voiding or emptying your bladder or urination. Okay, so once the urine is produced as it travels through the nephron and it gets collected through the collecting ducts, enters into the renal pelvis, it travels down the ureters, which it moves by peristalsis. So again, we're going to have muscle contractions moving down the ureter. It's going to push the urine into the bladder, where then it's stored. Now, urination is controlled by the micturition reflex, and you can have a look at this link if you want to, but I'm not going to show it here today. And there's basically 5 steps involved with the micturition reflex. Okay, first of all, we're going to have a sense receptor that's in the bladder, or these stretch receptors, and those stretchers are going to be receptors are going to be triggered as the bladder starts to fill up with urine. Okay, so these sensory nerve fibers, these receptors are going to be attached to these nerve fibers, and that's going to carry the information to the pelvic nerves, which then will travel to the spinal cord and then eventually, ultimately, to the thalamus in the brain. Now, as a result of that information to the brain, you're going to feel pressure on your bladder, and you're going to be aware of the fact that you may need to go and use the bathroom soon. Okay? So this is all controlled right now by the nervous system. Collection of information from a sensory neuron, the stretch receptor, mitigated through an interneuron through the pelvic nerve and the spinal cord, and then finally reaching the brain. Now, the brain is going to decode that information. It's going to let you know that you're going to be needing to use the bathroom soon, and it's going to send some information down the spinal cord to motor neurons to stimulate the wall of the bladder. Now, the bladder is one big muscle, basically. It's got a very thick muscular wall, and we call this the detrusor muscle. Okay, so those motor neurons are going to cause a contraction in the detrusor muscle. That's going to cause an increase of pressure, fluid pressure inside the bladder. And of course, fluid can't be compressed. So if the contraction of the muscle starts to make the fluid pressure go up, it has to go out. So that's going to cause you to urinate. Now, when you have about 200 milliliters of urine in your bladder, you're going to start to feel that need to urinate. We can probably hold a little bit more, and that would depend on the relative size of the person in some cases. But about 200 milliliters, that's when your brain is going to tell you, okay, you should get yourself into a place where you can use the bathroom. So here's a look at the same thing we just seen in the diagram. We start down here with our stretch receptors that are in the wall of the bladder. As the bladder, well, I guess it fills up with urine, those receptors get stretched out a little bit, and that causes information to be relayed through the spinal nerve and then travel into the thalamus in the brain. The brain is going to interpret that signal. It's going to send some motor neuron information back down. So here's our motor neuron, and that's going to cause this muscle in the bladder to contract, to get smaller, and as a result of that, it's going to push urine out through the urethra. Now, as you well know, you do have some control over when you're going to use the bathroom, and the reason you do that is because there are two sphincters that are between the bladder and the outside of the body. Okay? Now, urination cannot occur unless both sphincters are relaxed. Now, there's an external urethral sphincter that's on the outside, and this is the one you can control. So this is the one that if you really need, if you're far away from a bathroom, this is the one you can use to hold the urine until you get to a time where it's convenient to use it. And there's also an internal urethral sphincter, and this one's under involuntary control. Okay, so once the pressure builds up in the bladder, this internal urethral sphincter is going to open, and then of course all the pressure from your bladder is going to be placed on the external urethral sphincter, which is under your control. When both of these relax, then urination or micturition can occur. So here's a look at the bladder, and we'll see the two sphincters here. This is the internal urethral sphincter. This is the one that's under involuntary control, so we can't control this one. And this down here is the external urethral sphincter. This is the one we can control. So when pressure builds up too much inside the bladder, this muscle here will relax and open up. Urine can travel down as far as the external urethral sphincter. When you get to a place where you can use the bathroom, you voluntarily control this, you relax this particular muscle, and as a result, urination can occur. And with that, we are finished Unit 2.